Welcome to the Gary Null Show, a program designed to enhance mental, physical, and spiritual well-being through science and the wisdom of the ages. Let us take you on a journey of empowerment. Sit back, relax, and get ready to change your life for good.
I'm Gary Null. I'd like to welcome you to a very special presentation on natural pet health. It'll be a fun journey. And the payoff at the end is that you might have a dog with you twice as long, or a cat, as you otherwise would have, without having to pay enormous vet bills. And even the question and controversy around vaccines. Should you automatically vaccine for whatever the vet says? Maybe not. We'll explore that as well. Join me now. For years, veterinarians have suggested feeding ferrets cat food, but the requirements are not the same as cats, so don't do that. This is what I feed my ferrets. We start with some liver, chicken with the skin left on because there are nutrients in that skin. Salmon, which is the best fish along with sardines you can give your ferret. Eggs. The egg yolk is exceptionally good for your ferret. People don't think that ferrets should have fruit. Wrong. We want grapes, no, not white grapes, blue grapes, black grapes, red grapes. Apples, red apples are particularly good. And some things that can really help, like flaxseed and the flaxseed oil that's in here. You can use some raisins and nuts and seeds. Now, you also want cucumbers. Garlic is very important. Right here is yeast. Yeast has complete protein, live microorganisms that can help rebalance the probiotic activity within the intestines. Or you can give them 20 drops of cod liver oil down the throat. For skin and coat and perfect food for supplements, there are liquid vitamins for your ferret. Of all the nutrients you must make sure that your ferret gets, linoleic acid is very important. There's linolenic acid and linoleic acid. Both are important. These are very essential fatty acids. Make sure that they get them every day. How would you ideally feed your horse?
My rule of thumb is as much grass or hay as they can have, and then if they need more for their energy levels to be high enough for their activity, then a good quality plain grain diet with individualized nutraceutical supplementation.
A horse is a grazing animal. Its diet should consist mostly of grasses, and if he is not in heavy work, if his weight is good, you don't really need to feed grain. However, we are doing things with our horses that they wouldn't do in nature. We're working them harder, we're racing them, so we need to feed them a grain supplement. It should never be fed as the primary diet. Now, of course, grass in the pasture is the best diet for a horse. But in the winter, we have to feed hay. There's alfalfa, which is basically a legume. It's high in protein. And there's a timothy, which is a grass hay, orchard grass, and a mix of those. You can tell a good bale by looking at it. It's nice and soft. It's green. It has a nice smell to it. It's free of mold and free of dust. Some people, especially on the West Coast where hay is very scarce, they'll feed cubes. Cubes, though, I find is not the best diet alone. The horses need the long stem grasses in order to keep their digestive system moving. And then we're going to feed grains. Now, of course, the classic grain is oats, whole oats, crimped oats, steamed oats. Barley is used a lot lately. And then there's corn, which is readily available. Now, whole corn is hard for a horse to digest. Chopped corn is much better. You have to be careful of mold. It tends to go bad much easier. One thing that's not traditionally fed is flaxseed. Flaxseed is generally cooked, and keeps the horse's digestive system moving. Now, I feed some soybean meal to make sure my horses get enough protein. Rice bran is a newer thing. I've only heard about it in the last few years. It's mostly a high source of fat. It's rather expensive. It's more of a concentrate. It's fed the horses who need to gain weight. And this is wheat bran. Now, wheat bran is always served with hot water, and then it's served as a laxative in the winter when the horse is eating mostly dried food and nothing really succulent. Traditionally, you'll see in most barns a sweet feed. I don't use it myself too much for a couple of reasons. I find it has molasses on it that serves as a binding agent. Horses do love the taste, but I find molasses gets my horses a little too revved up.
We must keep in mind that with sweet feed, because there is molasses, a natural sweetener, it's prone to bacterial overgrowth. And you must be careful. Don't buy humongous quantities of these grains and just put them out, because if you don't watch the temperature of the barn or the storage area, aflatoxins, which are molds, can grow, and these spores are extremely toxic to animals. So we don't want your animal suffering from some form of bacterial overgrowth.
That's very true, Gary, and because of that, a lot of companies add preservatives, which I don't also want in my horse's food. I found ethoxyquin, BHA, BHT, which for the same reasons we don't want them in our diet, we certainly don't want them in our horse's diet. Of course, horses always love vegetables, especially anything sweet. Little carrots, you can give your horses large carrots, as much of that as possible. I feed more carrots in the winter just to give them something succulent, something with fresh enzymes in it. Horses also love apples, any kind of fruits, of course. Take the pits out of the peaches and the plums. Cherries, well, I've never tried that. That's a little too hard to de-pit. I feed my horses garlic on a daily basis, mostly chopped garlic because it's convenient and it mixes well with the food. It detoxifies them, helps their blood.
Good information. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
What are the types of fish food that are available?
Well, there's some commercially prepared products. Find out what kind of products your fish like. Some fish like vegetable matter. So you may have to incorporate more vegetable matter, such as nuri, which you can buy in the local market, seaweed, and clip that in the tank on a feeding clip. Also, you can use something like romaine lettuce. Clip that on a clip and stick it in the tank. Fish love it. Many hobbyists raise their own natural food, such as microworms or brine shrimp, and these work very well.
When feeding fish, people don't always know how much to feed.
That's a big problem, especially when they go on vacation. Feed as much as they consume within 5 minutes, not more. Do that once a day. After a while, you can do it twice a day, no more than that. Just a pinch, let them consume it all. If you see you have food on the bottom, after that time you fed too much, feed less. If you skip a day now and then, that's all right too. If you go away for a weekend, fish won't die, they'll survive. In nature, they don't eat every day.
Dr. Young, we have a lot of bird lovers, and they're almost always buying processed bird feed. What's wrong with the commercial bird feed on the market, and how would you suggest that you feed your bird?
Well, of course, my main thrust is the medical end of it, and particularly the homeopathic medical end of it. I'm not exactly the greatest husbandman in the world, but I do know certain things. That the food that's on the shelves in the majority of shops around the country is not rotated the way it should be. And as a result, the food sits there and loses whatever nutrient ability or effect that it had in the first place. So by the time you get around to buying something, it's been there pushed in the back for 6 months, it isn't worth much. That's number one. Number two, all of the foods that I know of, the popular foods that I know of, are heat processed and absolutely destroys everything that's in the food that's initially intended to give the bird a good nutritive state. So number one, I suspect that there are certain bird foods out there that you can research particularly with a veterinarian who does bird practice. I don't want to mention any particular companies, but there are several companies out there that produce foods that are not desecrated by heat processing. And also the fact that See, people, when they feed their birds, they don't realize that birds, now you're a bird fancier, you're not? Mm-hmm. So maybe you'll say, well, Dr. Young, you're wrong. But I feel that birds don't eat by what it tastes like, they eat by what it looks like. And if birds can actually become fearful of food because it doesn't look right to them. So it's important that birds have many, many kinds of fresh fruits and vegetables available to them in all their little containers all around the cage, and they're changed all the time. And I will tell you something that I notice, I really see this all the time, is the lack of hygiene with birds. People don't clean the cages like they should. The same thing goes, incidentally folks, the same thing goes with cat litter boxes, which get changed maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. Who would want to have a powder room in their home that was the practice? Nobody would, it would be just terrible. But they expect that their animals are going to get along being faced with this contamination on a daily basis. And the birds are the same. The perches, which never get washed off, which come into our hospital caked with excrement, and old food just sitting there, old food. So, and once again, and fresh water. The water has to be changed every day, and bottled water at that, given what we're dealing with in the tap waters today. So, fresh water, hygiene, fresh foods, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. You see the word fresh, not processed. And those foods that are processed by the several companies that I'm aware of, they're cold processed. They're not heat processed. And there lies the secret.
That's a lot of good information. A few extra things that I have found work for the birds that I have. I take the fruits, like grapes and piece of apple, and any fruit that you have in season, and you put it on a chain, because I find the birds like to go to a perch and eat off something that's hanging. Giving fresh, not tap water. I don't give dogs, cats, or any animals tap water because it's polluted. On my ranch, of course, I have mineral water from the deep minerals, and that's terrific, and you should either use bottled water or mineral water. And I change the water every day, and take hydrogen peroxide, or you can take a bleach, diluted, and you clean the cage, and you clean all the surface, because that's where the bacteria and viruses and parasites exist. And when you do that, you'll frequently clean up the hygiene so well that they're not suffering from upper respiratory infections or parasite infections. Parasites are so common in animals. I've had buffaloes, I've had Scottish Highlander cattle and eland and elk and nilgide on my ranch down in Texas when I had that. And the number one problem we had was parasites. So you had to keep it all clean. So cleaning it regularly is important. Fresh fruits and vegetables important, taking carrots and broccoli and things that they would find in the wild.
I love talking about how to care for a bird because there's so very little known about how to keep a bird healthy and how to extend longevity. Birds are pretty tricky, but if you really think about what a bird would be eating and doing in nature and try to bring that into your home, you will have a bird that is disease-free. Processed foods that you buy in regular stores are generally laced with chemicals, and birds are extremely sensitive to chemicals. Make sure that your bird gets plenty of fresh seeds and nuts on a daily basis. Herbs are important as well. I like this mix because it's loaded with everything: fruits, vegetables, seeds, and herbs. I started introducing whole grains for my big hooked parrots. Brown rice, as an example, especially if it's organic, will supply your bird with B complex and the necessary fiber, so essential to keeping your bird's intestinal tract unclogged. If you feed rice, it's really important that you cook it well. Make sure that it's soft. Remember too that especially in good season, corn on the cob will provide lots of activity for your birds. Will exercise the jaw, but corn is a very toxic vegetable, so please be sure that you wash it properly or source organic corn. Every morning, when I'm having my grapefruit, I juice for my bird Macmillan. I just squeeze out the juice. He gets his naturally occurring bioflavonoids and his vitamin C that way, as opposed to a synthetic vitamin or mineral, which really, in my opinion, is worthless because the birds have to expend so much energy to break the synthetic form of vitamin mineral down. It's so much better to just give it straight from the food. People often ask me, what do I do for snacks? How about organic popcorn? Your bird will love you for it. If you have a bird at home, you probably are using a cuttle bone. Now for my tiny little finch, I need to use the cuttle bone, although it's not natural, it's chemically treated, and I worry about that. That's the one exception, but he needs the calcium from it. But a big hook parrot, such as Macmillan, will drill out calcium sourced from a chicken bone, and that's a much better way of going than buying a synthetic source sprayed cuttle bone.
We've gone out to find those individuals who have taken control of a more natural approach to helping their pets. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk with a whole variety of people. You'll see their pets, and you'll see the difference. You'll even see photographs before and after. So join us now for a very interesting part of this program. Kathy, tell us about Kishka.
4 years ago, Kishka was diagnosed with an autoimmune illness. Her white blood cell count was extremely high, was killing off her red blood cells. So she was put on prednisone, which I guess is a normal treatment for this, and just didn't do well. Her hair coat became very brittle. She became bald, just listless. So I decided it was time to take a different approach and put her on holistic medicine, herbs and supplements.
And what happened?
Incredible difference. Within 6 months, she was completely off of prednisone. Her hair coat came back. She wasn't bald anymore. She was active, happy, bright. She's a new dog. Just amazing, the difference in her.
So homeopathy, a natural diet, vitamins, changed your dog's life.
Significantly. I truly believe that without it, she would have died.
I learned a powerful lesson in this with my horse Vivaldi, who had some problems in his shoeing and his feet that were a major problem and really should be fixed. Because he was in my mind sound, and in the mind of my current blacksmiths and vets he was sound, I didn't change it. Years down the road, he became practically crippled. He was lame at the walk and in a high degree of pain. This was when I started to bring him down to Dr. Shoemaker and in fact leave him there and begin major reconstruction on his feet and shoeing in conjunction with chiropractic, acupuncture, hydrotherapy, laser, magnetic, anything I could do in a positive way to help this horse. A year after that, he was working sound. Even before that, I brought him to Dr. Shoemaker, and 2 months later I picked him up and he was running around in a field. He now is being worked and ridden, and he not only is sound from these changes, but because he was in discomfort before and I couldn't recognize it, now that he's more comfortable, his attitude has changed. He's actually a younger, in many ways, horse than he was before. So at 17, he has more energy, more life, and is more comfortable than he ever has been.
Here is a 27-month-old West Highland White Terrier named Blake. When Blake came to our practice, he had been treated very responsibly by conventional medicine. He was highly allergic to several different things. One was wool, so all the carpets were taken out of the house. Grasses, fleas, molds. He was desensitized to what he was allergic to. That didn't bring him any relief. He was put on a lot of cortisone and antibiotics, shampoos. After all his medical therapy, he was suffering so badly that the conventional veterinarian that treated him very, very responsibly recommended euthanasia. We saw Blake. He was about 27, 28 months old, and we started him on a program where we worked on his metabolic system and his immune system, and we started healing Blake from inside out. The skin is nicknamed the third kidney. It's a powerful detoxifying organ, and one of its jobs is to get rid of poisons. What we did is, as we started working with Blake, he literally, over the first 3 months, went through one of these healing processes. He literally lost all the hair on his body. His skin turned very, very thickened and dark black, and he had welts all over. because we highly trained the owner of Blake to expect this detoxification healing crisis. She persevered through it. And then here is Blake 9.5 months later. As you can see right here, the rugs have been returned to the house. And then here, 2.5 years later, and he actually entered the show ring and was winning ribbons. And you can see the grasses that he was also allergic to. In this picture, he was totally off medication. This is an 11-year-old cat named Jupiter. And you're actually seeing Jupiter's eyes, the pupils of Jupiter's eyes, dilated widely open with no response to light flashed into him. Usually when you flash a light into an eye, the pupil should constrict. The reason that Jupiter's doesn't constrict is that in this picture over here, you can actually see the outer white surface is the skull, the inner black surface is the brain, and that white circle in the middle, all filled in, is Jupiter's brain tumor. It takes up between 1/3 and 1/2 of his entire brain, putting pressure on the nerves to the eye, causing the blindness. Jupiter was also convulsing. Jupiter, at the facility that Jupiter had his CAT scan, they refused to do surgery because the tumor was so big. The surgeon thought he would destroy the rest of the brain while trying to get the tumor out. They put Jupiter on cortisone and his convulsions increased, and they recommended putting Jupiter to sleep. We started Jupiter on therapy, alternative therapy, took him off the drugs, and here is Jupiter 22 months later, 13.5 years old, with normal vision. Jupiter lived till be about 15 years of age and died of old age causes, not so much brain cancer. His symptoms of brain tumor never returned. Meet Whiskey. This is a 28-month-old dog who had a disease considered typically fatal to the Rottweiler. This dog, the owner of this dog, actually consulted 12 institutions, was treated by a really good conventional veterinarian. He had a condition called inflammatory bowel disease, which is becoming very common. But in the Rottweiler, it has another component called lymphangiectasia, which is a disruption of the normal lymph system, almost like a forerunner of lymph cancer. And when those two hit the Rottweiler, it's considered almost 100% fatal. After literally thousands of dollars worth of medical therapy, this dog was referred to by the veterinarian. And even though he said this is 100% fatal, we really don't say no to any patient because we think every animal deserves a chance in our practice. So I had the veterinarian have the owners bring the dog in on Monday, and the veterinarian told me that Whiskey would be dead by Monday. He literally gave him less than 2 days to live. So they carried Whiskey in by stretcher, weighing, I think it was either 54 or 57 pounds, totally emaciated. And as you can see here in these pictures, he's just a breathing skeleton. We cold turkey Whiskey from all the drugs he was on. He was on many drugs. We usually don't cold turkey, but we had no other choice in Whiskey. We started alternative therapy, nutritional supplements, homeopathic remedies, injections of homeopathic remedies into acupuncture points. Here is Whiskey. Five weeks later, he responded dramatically. And honest to goodness, this is Whiskey. 3.5 months later, 2.5 years later. And Whiskey and I just appeared on Good Morning America. 6 years later, he weighs about 130, 135 pounds. So this is alternative therapy at its best, and including the healing crisis or the process that the body must go through in an attempt to get itself better. So here is actually Whiskey's bio-nutritional analysis. And through Whiskey's blood sample, we found out the values which are outside the normal range, the values which are inside the normal range reported by the laboratory, and those which are starting to get to the outside of each normal range, which also need nutraceutical complementation. Here is Whiskey's actual program, and as you can see here, we have each milligram of everything Whiskey needs: chromium, magnesium, adrenal, pancreas, stomach, thymus, determined by the bloods, determined by whiskey's condition, but exactly to the milligram that whiskey needs and how many times a day. And then all of this is put into one vacuum-sealed supplement. So instead of whiskey in the old days had to take at least 10, 12, 14 different capsules at least 2 to 3 times a day, whiskey is now getting just one powder with all the filler gone once or twice a day. And you saw the pictures of whiskey before. He's 10 years old and he's doing phenomenally.
I hope you've enjoyed, at least up to this point, what we've shared, but there's more to come. We'll continue with our program next week. I'll see you then.